On the night of March 2nd, 1917, in his railway carriage in Pskov, Nicholas II said 5 words that would define how history remembers his fall. Everybody betrayed me. He wasn't talking about revolutionaries in the streets of Petrograd. He wasn't talking about strangers, or enemies, or people who had always opposed him. He was talking about his own generals, the men who had sworn an oath to protect his throne with their lives. This is the story of how the Tsar of Russia was brought down not by an angry mob, but by a carefully coordinated message from the men he trusted most. By March 1st, 1917, Petrograd was in chaos. Strikes, mutinies, and food shortages had turned the capital into a powder keg. Nicholas, away at military headquarters, tried to return home. His train was diverted. He ended up stranded in the small city of Pskov, cut off from reliable information, surrounded only by a handful of aides. It was the perfect position for what came next. General Mikhail Alexeyev, the Tsar's own chief of staff, the man Nicholas trusted to run the entire war effort, made a decision that would change Russian history. Instead of defending the throne, Alexeyev sent a telegram to every major front commander in the Russian army. The message was simple. Did they support the Tsar's abdication? Within hours, the replies started coming in. Nearly every general who responded said yes. Even Nicholas's own first cousin, Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich, a man who had commanded Russian forces and carried the Romanov name himself, wrote that it was his duty as a loyal subject to beg the Tsar to give up his crown to save Russia and the dynasty. Read that again. The Tsar's own cousin called abdication an act of loyalty. This wasn't a single act of treason. It was something far more unsettling. A coordinated consensus built quietly and almost bureaucratically by men who had never directly disobeyed an order in their lives. When the telegrams reached Nicholas, he didn't see chaos. He saw something worse. He saw agreement. Overwhelming, near-unified agreement among the very people whose job was to protect his rule. There was almost no army left willing to fight for him, not because they were defeated in battle, but because his own commanders had already decided the war was over before a single shot was fired in his defense. Historians have debated for over a century whether Alexeyev's actions were betrayal or pragmatism. Alexeyev himself reportedly agonized over the decision, feeling that it looked disloyal even as he made it. He wasn't plotting against his emperor for personal gain. He believed genuinely that continuing to support Nicholas would destroy the army and hand victory to Germany. That's what makes this story so much more disturbing than a simple tale of treachery. These men weren't villains twirling a mustache. They were loyal officers who concluded independently and then collectively that loyalty to Russia now meant abandoning loyalty to the Tsar. And Nicholas never saw it coming. He had spent his entire reign surrounded by men who said yes to him, who saluted, who followed protocol, who never directly challenged his authority. He mistook that obedience for genuine loyalty. He never tested whether it would survive a real crisis. It didn't. What makes this even more painful is a detail almost no one knows. Not every general turned away. 2 commanders, Fyodor Keller and Hussein Khan Nakhchivansky, refused to go along with the consensus. Keller sent a telegram offering to march his troops to Pskov and defend the throne. A telegram bearing Khan Nakhchivansky's name made the same offer, though some historians believe it was actually drafted and sent by his own chief of staff without his full knowledge. Neither message changed anything. By the time they arrived, the decision had effectively already been made. And what historians have found most unsettling since isn't some outside conspiracy. It was Nicholas's own general staff, the men standing closest to him in Pskov, who decided which telegrams reached his desk and which didn't. Nicholas signed his abdication, believing he had no support left in his entire army. That may not have even been true. He simply never found out in time, and the people who kept him from finding out weren't his enemies. They were the men he trusted most. Two men, Alexander Guchkov and Vasily Shulgin, representatives of the Duma, arrived in Pskov that night to formally request what was, by then, already inevitable. At 11:40 p.m., Nicholas walked back into the room holding the signed manifesto. Witnesses described him as exhausted, but strangely calm, almost relieved. 300 years of Romanov rule ended not with gunfire, but with paperwork, signed by a man who had just learned, in the worst possible way, what his trust was actually worth. That same night, alone in his train compartment, Nicholas opened his diary and wrote a single line. All around me, treason, cowardice, and deceit. Not years later, in some quiet reflection from exile. That very night, hours after signing, while it was still raw. But perhaps the more uncomfortable lesson isn't about the generals at all. It's about how easily we mistake silence for loyalty and obedience for genuine support, until the one moment we actually need it tested. By then, it's already too late to find out the truth.